Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back with another episode, and I'm absolutely thrilled today to have Lisa Ducharme. Lisa, first of all, welcome and thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Tom. I'm really excited actually to be here.
So, we met at Podfest Expo 2025 and had a great conversation. I asked her if she would be willing to come on a pod and talk about what she's doing, because not only is her story great, but what she's doing is great. And she graciously agreed to do. With that, Lisa, could you tell us about your professional career leading up to what you're doing now?
Absolutely. What's fascinating is my professional career just really has nothing to do with entrepreneurships. I was working out at Westfield State University, taking care of all of our students who were military connected. When in 2022, a dear friend of mine and founder of the Yukon EBV program passed away. And I was asked to step in as the entrepreneur in residence. And I said, absolutely. I've been helping that program for 10 years. I had been working with veteran businesses for 10 years. And then shortly after that, I decided it was time to do it full time.
What was your background in the military?
I was human resources personnel. I actually started out as personal affairs, which was casualty, passports, visas, and marriages, awards and decorations, and
What branch of
uniforms.
the service?
And then over to
Okay.
Air Force,
And highest rank you attained?
E6, tech sergeant.
Okay. So everyone understands you served our country. You came out of that. You have the ability to sit down with a veteran and talk to them as a fellow veteran. Why was that important previously? But more importantly, what has that brought you forward to now in terms of entrepreneurship?
What's important to understand is that a lot of me, when I retired, I did the duty and I retired back in December 2006. And I went out to get a job in human resources and I couldn't find one. And I did what a lot of veterans do. We don't look for the resources for veterans. And so for me, I just went looking for a job. I found a temporary job and then eventually I found a job as an executive assistant. That dynamic of not using or looking for any veteran resources is really where I think I fumbled when I first got out of the military. The military teaches us to be a civilian and does not teach us how to be a veteran. And so when you get out, you try to assimilate into the unity. And for me, that was problematic. And I got laid off back in 2020. I completed my bachelor's degree, which was hospitality and tourism management. And I was one of the first to use the post 9/11 GI Bill. And when I laid off, Massachusetts has this really great policy. You are required to sit with a mass hire rep who happens to be a veteran who will work one on one with you. So she only works with veterans. In my case, it was Gary Howe. And Gary realized I didn't know anything about veteran benefits. I knew about the post 9/11 GI Bill, but nothing else. And he said, okay, let's look at some of the veteran benefits you're entitled to and let's figure out. I said, I want to get education in 3D animation, interactive media. And I know that I have enough of my post left in order to make that happen. And Gary, believe it or not, is the one who sent me on the tour or process of being an entrepreneur. Was he brought me into voice, veterans outreach and the community engagement. So I could start doing outreach in the veteran community along with these other organizations that work with veterans. And I realized the true value of being a veteran and understanding the resources that are available to us.
So I'd like to maybe turn a little bit about your leadership philosophy. What are some of the key points you've developed in your writing, speaking, and training for entrepreneurs around leadership?
Leadership, and we taught it on an early age in the military. In the military, They teach us everything we need to know about leadership, good and bad. In fact, some of the best leaders that I had taught me some of the most valuable lessons, but so did some of the worst leaders that I had in the military, taught me some of the best lessons, i.e., what not to do in leadership roles. And I will tell you, I always start with leading with authenticity because here's one thing: we have to be authentic today. We are in a time frame in which we were not necessarily so much in the military when I are today. If you're not, people are going to be able to tell. People are going to be able to tell if you are just being, if you're just being yourself or not being yourself, or if you're trying to be somebody else, they're going to know. So you have to really understand that. And for any entrepreneur, any veteran who's thinking about what career path should I take or what entrepreneur journey should I go on, with their why. I understand the why they're doing it, not the superficial why. I don't like the way they treat me, so I want a different job. I'm going to take this job because it's available. Really understand your, because the one thing in the middle, you picked your career for the most part. Not everybody, but the majority pick their career, pick a special duty. You know why you want to do that. Anticipate it's going to be a lifetime. So understanding the why, that's one of my leadership philosophies, because if I don't understand, I help you get where you want to go, because it's a part of my responsibility, whether I'm connected to you or not, is to help you get where you want to go. And understanding the why gets that. And a lot of times, I think what's really important, especially if you're in an organization or an entrepreneur with employees, is building those strong teams. General Powell once said, if you don't have a strong team, you've got nothing. You can have a team, but if it's not a strong team, so building that team, the people you know, the people you respect is really important. And I mentioned General Powell only because I love his 13 rules of leadership. Those are something I grew up with in the military because he had said those early on in my career. And I love his get mad, get over it. I think that is a policy everybody should have. You can't do anything, so why let people rent space in your head? Get mad, get over it, learn from it. I have taken that throughout my entire career in my entire life.
So, what are the Tootsie Roll Marines?
So I love the Tootsie. So there are very few stories about Korean War veterans. And the Tootsie Roll Marines, you had in Korea, they were bombarded, all their vehicles were shut down. And all of a sudden, their call tag was Tootsie Roll. So they had ordered supplies and they see these crates coming and supplies to fix all their vehicles. To their surprise, when it comes down there, it is actually bunches of Tootsie Rolls. Now, how somebody sends 3 crates of Tootsie Rolls is completely beyond me. But instead, the gentleman who was over it said, okay, just pass it out. Let everybody eat it. He didn't throw a fit. He didn't get angry. I imagine he did behind the scenes, but in person, in front of people, he took it with a grain of salt. And then he realized that when he chewed the Tootsie Rolls, they got hard because it was so cold out. They were able to fix some of their vehicles and get out of there. You just don't do much better than the Roll Marines.
So, I interviewed a woman a couple of weeks ago who grew up in the 60s as a NASA brat. And she told me that her father, there's a scene in the movie of Apollo 13 when they lock engineers in a room and they throw a bunch of stuff on the table and says, this is all the equipment you can have to fix the oxygen system on Apollo 13 to get those guys home. And her father was in that room. Yeah. Marines and Tootsie Rolls. It makes perfect sense to me, actually.
And I love that story. And I loved when they were in the room in Apollo 13. That was a phenomenal movie.
So, what are some of the personal leadership principles that you advocate? Do you talk to entrepreneurs about creating their own personal leadership principles? You've already mentioned Colin Powell's 13 principles. Do you just bring a group of leadership principles and say, fit what works for you? Or how do you help guide a entrepreneur through that part of their leadership journey?
So that one, I actually make a game out of it. And one of the things that I do is I take General Powell's 13 rules of leadership and I say, I want you to come up with as many rules of leadership that you can live by, that if you make a decision, that somebody can look at that rule and actually you made the decision you made. And so what I do is I sit down and I have them do it. And I'll start off with one of my rules of leadership is discipline, which can be a positive and a negative because for me, I am very disciplined. I'm very structured. If I say we're going to start a meeting at 1 o'clock, we're starting that meeting at 1 o'clock. I'm not giving you a couple minutes before or after. It starts at one, which in the civilian world can be problematic, but they get a habit of getting used to it. So I like to use examples. And so I have them sit down and I have them just write out some of the great tenets and leadership skills that they've seen in people that they've respected. And then I have them write down some of the leadership skills that really tick them off, that people did that just really crawl underneath their skin that they can learn from and come up with a better way of doing it. And so we sit down and sometimes people only have one. And I was sitting about a year ago and he could only come up with one, safe self-resilience. He said, that's all I need. That's all you need to know about me and my business is self-resilience. Of course, I kind of said I'd like to see a little bit more, but if that's all you're going to give me, think about it, and hopefully later he felt resilience was good. But then once you cut rules, then you sit down and then you take a scenario and just throw it at them. Usually what I'll do is I'll pull something up that's happening in the news and then I'll ask them how they'll respond to it and I'll see which of their leadership skills match their actual response. And it can be very fun. It encourages people to think about their leadership skills. It also encourages people to think, what is a leader? Because there are dynamics and times in which we have no idea whether or not somebody is a leader. In the military, you are put in a leadership role right out of college if you're an officer. And imagine being an officer without any leadership roles, without any guidance except for what you were taught in school. And you're going to come in and supervise somebody who has 12 or 13 years over you. Sometimes you got a little bit of a challenge. So you better have some solid leadership skills.
I did a retrospective series on 9/11 20 years after, and my last interview was a gentleman who was a college senior in ROTC on 9/11, and, they told him that night in ROTC, "Boys, you're going to war." And he did, and he was 21 years old leading a 42-man tank corps, 4 tanks, not a corps, but 4 tanks, and he said exactly that. He said, "I went to my master sergeant and said, 'Run it, and I'll pack you up.'" Absolutely, your point, though, on you can be 21 and you can be put in charge of 50 men, and in that case, it was literally life or death because he was in combat. You learn quickly. Let me change the focus a little bit to pay it forward. I'm a huge proponent of that. Probably don't know, but I am the Pay It Forward ambassador at Podfest, and I have funded that initiative for many years because I think it's so important. But it also, and the reason I found it so important, the first time I went to Podfest, I plopped down at a table with people who were clearly younger than me, and they were all in college. So we got to talking, and they were 18, 19, 20, and they'd gotten part of the Pay It Forward program, which paid for their ticket. But they brought a level of enthusiasm and verve and just wanting to soak everything in that I just found infectious. So part of what I try to do is pay it forward because I think I have a responsibility because there were others who helped me, but also they bring something to me as well. So I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts around pay it forward and why do you advocate it's so critical?
Because I learned it early on from my dad. So my dad retired Air Force Vietnam. He lived in a time in which the United States hated us. We lived on a military base, so when you went off base, people would yell and scream at my dad, and my sister sold protest records on the base, go figure, just guess that one. But he taught you have to pay it forward. He would work the holidays so that the troops with younger kids could take the time off. So when I joined the Air Force, and even before then, I was a candy striper. But when I joined the Air Force, pay it forward was the ongoing theme in my career. So at Christmas time, even though I did, much, I helped establish an angel because I had seen it at a previous base. I airman's attic with a friend of mine because I knew what it was like not to have things, afford things, and even thrift shops back then didn't have furniture and things. And when you're moving from time to time, other stuff, so people were willing to donate. Our airmen could get it for free. If we don't pay it forward, then we fail. We're put on this earth for a reason. Who believe in God and people who don't, I don't even get into that. But for me, it's important that we take the time to help others because it's not just about us. It is about everything else and everybody we leave behind. When you open a door, you don't just close it. You reach back, you grab somebody's hand, and you walk them with them through that door. But don't shut that door on your way out. Keep it open for other people. One of the ongoing strategies that I've tried to live by because I am blessed to have a mind like nobody else. I don't put emotion in anything I do. I'm very strategic. I'm executing, I'm planning. My emotions don't even come into play where emotions have a tendency to get involved and mess things up. So if you can just see straightforward without the emotions, you actually have a lot more opportunities than most people do.
That's absolutely fascinating because when I was about 55, I learned the following lesson. I always knew that if the universe closed one door, it would open another. What I didn't realize until that time was you had to have the courage to walk through it. I have heard others say you have to hold that door open, but you've taken that a step further, Lisa, because you've said, I'm going to walk through it with you. So can you expand on that a little bit? I find that just great.
Thank you. That's actually what the Massachusetts Veterans Chamber of Commerce is built on. I have an experience because somebody let me come in and volunteer with the EBV program. So I got to learn the veteran businesses. Then I was able to take all the lessons that I learned and help other people with their businesses. Every Wednesday morning, I open a Zoom session where anybody can come on and ask any question for business. We don't understand sometimes about the skills that we learned in the military. A lot of times we think when we get out of the military, we think the skills we learned were just military because the military teaches us to be a civilian and not a veteran. What I do is I teach the veterans how to use those skills that they learned in the military and encourage them to remember that they're a veteran. In business, at school, you're a student first and a veteran second. But in business, you're always a veteran because that forces you to remind yourself of the skills. So I like to remind them of that. And I walk them through not only helping find, but I help them understand their why. I help them with IS World Report that most business owners don't even touch because they don't even know how to use it, but you can get it free from any small business development center. So for me, it's all about helping them through connecting them where they need to connect, hosting events that bring them together as veterans so that we can together move forward because veteran businesses have, unfortunately, a higher rate of failure than our civilian counterparts. And I think the reason for that is because we have that yin and yang from our strengths in the military and the lessons we learned in the military. Determination can be really great, but it can also be detrimental if you're thinking about it from a military strategic point and not an entrepreneur point.
Lisa, you are a prolific writer. And I wanted to explore that a little bit with you. How have you found that writing complements, supplements, leads is a part of not only your overall message, but your overall marketing, and how do you use all of the writings you've done, both in books, softcover or print books, but also Kindle books. How has that helped you to market Lisa?
Actually, you're gonna hate this answer, but I don't use them to
Okay.
market Lisa. I in fact, I tell my businesses all the time how to use their books to market themselves. But for me, it's not about marketing myself. For me, each book I created was created for a purpose. See the Destiny book, which has over 100 lessons and skills we learned in the military. I give to veterans because I got tired of over the 12 years of outreach that I do with veterans outreach and the community engagement. I got tired of hearing veterans say they don't have any skills that can correlate with the civilian counterparts. And I'm like, you got a ton of them. So I give those books out to veterans who need it, the veterans that I know will benefit from it. I did my We're Stronger Together Strength and Diversity for veteran entrepreneurs because I want them to see the foundational pieces. So I don't market that either. And my leadership book, I did that book specifically because I was arguing with a CEO. He was really annoying me. He had the he had all these beautiful quotes on his wall, but he was having trouble with his employees. And so I asked him, how do you use the quotes on your wall? Because they were great leadership quotes, let me tell you. And he couldn't tell me how he used them. And I gave him an example. My favorite quote that I live by for as long as I can remember is I do the very best I can, the very best I know how, and I'll keep on doing so until the end. If the end brings me out all wrong, what is said against me won't amount to anything. If the end brings me out all right, 10 angels were all wrong. 10 angels swearing I was right would make no difference. Abraham Lincoln. I said, "That tells you that I'm gonna do the best I can, and if you're not satisfied with it, I don't care because it's the best that I can, and it's what I wanna do." And so he turned around and he started arguing with me that you shouldn't the quotes are just sayings that he likes to hear. So then I wrote the book and I gave it to him, and that's the reason that book was written. So each book actually was inspired by a client by the book, and Amazon them out there for free, and they are great ways to show your subject matter expertise if that's what you want to do. If you need to show your subject matter expertise, you do. And I think that one of the biggest values of writing books is it shows your expertise. And when I have veteran businesses, I can't write a book. I get a college degree. I say to them, what does a college degree have to do with writing a book? I actually, when I almost got kicked out of the Air Force because my reading comprehension level was below third grade. But because they didn't find out until almost a year after I was in the service, my commander decided to allow me to stay. It also had to do with the fact that I was the first person on duty at a terrorist attack and did really well and made us look really good. But it was one of those moments in time where anybody can write a book as long as you're an expert at it. And if you use AI, please don't use it to write the book. Write the book first and then have AI help.
When my daughter was 7, she wrote her first book. And I said, "Honey, how did you do that?" She said, "Dad, it's easy to write a book. You just sit down and do it." Pretty good advice. Let's talk about what's about to be one of our joint loves, which is podcasting. You're about to start off a podcast. Could you tell us a little bit about it? Maybe even preview an episode or 2 for us?
Absolutely. So, one of the things that I find very valuable is veterans throughout history and veteran businesses and the difference that we make. And so, one of the first podcasts, it's going to start off with the story of the United States Playing Card Company that was co founded by a Revolutionary War veteran. And what most people don't know is that the U.S. Playing Card Company was really integral in our military training during World War I and World War II. They actually made playing cards, mission and showed different types of mortars and stuff. And then in World War II, showed different types of planes. And so they were teaching as we were going along. And during the Gulf War, they created the terrorist leaders deck and they had so that we could learn who the terrorists were. Most people remember that. And in 2018, they created the 9/11 leaders. These are veteran military spouse and military businesses that were started after 9/11. But here's the twist. The twist is what most people don't know about the US Playing Card Company is during World War II, they made decks of cards specifically for or for prisoners of war. And they gave them the cards. And when they gave them the cards and they put the cards in water, they dissolved and you could see the map underneath it to help them escape. And then we go in and we spotlight one of my Massachusetts veteran businesses and talk about their value and what they offer. And then we give a little tip on AI because everybody needs to use AI today. It's coming out in Word and everywhere else. So we give a little tip on how to use AI. Then we go in to answer 5 questions, frequently asked questions from veteran businesses, followed by one of whatever the resource happens to be picked for that day. And then I give them all a challenge. And the challenge is always going to be something to do with their military skills and find one skill that they're using in whatever topic that happens to be and how are they using it today. It's kind of an education piece, but also to remind people of the value of our veteran businesses and how we've changed the world. Not only with the businesses and the entrepreneurship, and I know all businesses change the world, but veterans, we come in from a different angle.
So, Lisa, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode. But before we leave, I wanted to ask you if our listeners wanted to connect with you, if they wanted to find out any more information about any of the initiatives you have going on, what might be the best place or places for them to go?
So they can go to the massvcc.org. That's massvcc.org. They can find me on LinkedIn. I'm linkedin.com/Lisa Ducharme, or they can find me on Instagram at Lisa Ducharme 2020.
Lisa, this has been a great discussion. I hope we can continue this conversation.
Me to it.